Hello to you, welcome back to the channel. It's really great to see you. I hope I find you well. Welcome back to the 009 project build, and we've really made some great progress here. Over the course of the last video, it really came together. That static grass just made this scene. Now, after we finished filming, I carried on a little bit, adding some more of the bushes as per what we talked about, and you can see on the model that this has really come together to give a sense of wild, rough, almost moorland, and it just really starts to set that scene. And today in this video, what I really want to look at is finally those rocks that I cast. Do you remember those way back in one of the really early episodes? Well, they've been hardening off, and I'm going to set to work on getting them coloured, and then we can place them around the waterfall area. I'm also going to be looking at adding some trees, and for this we've got the seafoam material from Gauge Master, and I'm going to be making some trees to add to this scene. Now, I don't want to swamp the scene with too many trees, but I want enough to suggest something more than open rolling fells. So come with me in association with the channel sponsor Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories, and I'm really looking forward to showing you the progress on Project 009. First up today, I want to look at making some trees, and this is an area where perhaps some people struggle a little bit, but they don't have to. There's some great products on the market, and actually there's no one way to make the perfect tree. There's several different techniques that each make their own unique great results, and I've used quite a lot of these over the years. There's also some ready-made products you can get on the market, but what I'm going to be looking at today is the Gauge Master Seafoam. And I've done a video on making these trees, and it's really simple. I'm combining it with some of the War World Scenic scatters and just building up with some layering spray that scatter on the bare bones of this sea moss, which actually, believe it or not, is a very sustainable natural product. I believe it comes from Scandinavia, but it's quite easy to just buy it dried and in a box ready to go. Seagrass can be bought in a lot of forms, most commonly forest in a box, and it's a great product. As you can see in its bare form, it does actually look a lot like trees, which is why it has found favour amongst modelers to represent trees of various sizes and types. In its dried form like this, one thing you have to be careful about is that it does go a little bit brittle. So as you can see, there's already a couple of pieces there falling off. Now, do keep these, they make great smaller trees, but it does mean you have to be ever so careful when handling this stuff, because you don't want it to literally come apart in your hands. You can paint the trunks if you want with a more bark-like colour, but actually representing something like, I don't know, silver birch, that light colour is actually pretty good in my eyes. Now, the spray that I'm going to be using on these, I've chosen to use War World Scenic's Static Grass Layering Spray, because this is a good product that I've been using for static grass application, and I've got quite a bit to hand, and it is vastly superior to the other option, which I know a lot of people like to use, which is cheap hairspray. Now, cheap hairspray, it has the redeeming feature of being quite cheap, obviously, but it isn't quite as good. At the end of the day, it can go a little bit clumpy, and hairspray is only designed to be a temporary thing, so just bear in mind that it may not hold forever. So that's why I've chosen to go with the War World Scenic's Static Grass Layering Spray. I've also chosen a number of other products. In this instance, these have also come from War World Scenics, and these are going to be the Foliage. Now, I've gone for some different shades of green. My thoughts with this is that texture and variation of colour are really important. Now, what I'm going to do with this is hold it over the spray box that we've made. It doesn't really matter if this gets messy, because quite frankly, it's expendable. Shake up the static grass layering spray. and just carefully spray that in. And there we've got our first layer. I'm going to go with quite clumpy granules here. So literally just grab a handful from the bag and we're going to sprinkle them in. They'll stick into the layering spray and just slowly start to build up the layers of that foliage in there. I've seen some people just put these in a box, spray them up, put them in a box with all the different scatters and then shake them up. Now, I'm always wary about this. I've seen some good effects done like that and I've seen some bad effects as well. So I prefer a level of control, in all honesty with you. And we're going to apply a little bit more of the lacquering spray. I'm going to mix up a different colour now. And this is the finer olive green scatter. And these finer granules kind of fall into the tree and give a sense that there's something else within the structure rather than just on the outside. Just keep on building up the layers. And this is where just shaking it up in a box sometimes doesn't really quite cut it. You don't get the same variance of colours and textures. Just using some of this scatter at the bottom. It's mixed in with some of the layering glue so you get more clumps out of it. Which can work quite well. And let's get some dark green foliage onto these. So just give them another quick blast over with the spray. You do go through a lot of the spray, but I think you'll agree the effects justify it. Colours, textures, this is what's really important. And as you do different trees, major on different colours. Real trees tend to have a little bit of a preference to a certain colour, each of them slightly different, and that's how you build up the variety on your layout. What I want to do now is add in the red flowers, and this is going to be quite a subtle dusting. We've got all the deep leaves and everything into these trees. The flowers on the trees do tend to be more towards the outside. That's something I've noticed. Do study real trees just to get a feel for how they look. So with this, what I want to do is just get a small amount. I'm going to spray it over the trees, get a coating of the spray, and then just flick the packet is the trick. You don't want to drown the tree in this stuff. Just a suggestion of red is enough. And I think that is going to be absolutely enough. Too much and they start to look a bit silly. You might as well have not bothered with all of those previous leaves. I'm going to just give it another blast as a fixative. And there we are done. Now you can repeat that with as many trees as you want, and you can see the difference between the original material, this little piece that fell off, and the tree that we've now ended up with. What I've got here is some of the finished trees. It's quite a subtle effect, but I do really like it, and that War World Scenic scatter just goes together to make these look like they've got an actual foliage. And if we need to, we can add a little bit more, but I'm quite happy with what we've got. Sometimes in the model railway world, less is more, and I think that these are going to work quite well on the model. Now this is the side that I've chosen to add a few trees in. We've got this lovely escarpment here which has come together actually quite naturally as we've put the static grass in, and I want to add a few trees here in this area. This is where we prepped the ground before we put the static grass in with some of that woodland ground cover, the kind of detritus bits of logs and stuff, and that's actually in there under the static grass, giving a suggestion of stuff that's come off trees. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a jeweler's screwdriver and just poke a hole all the way through that plaster layer. I might need to really give it a tap or two with a hammer, I'm guessing, because there's a lot of plaster on there. But once we've got that hole, all we need to do is to take one of these trees that's already made, coat its stem with glue, and just put it into the hole. And then as we move on, we get more and more trees in. I've got 6 here. If I need more, I can make more using exactly the same technique. And it's just a case of picking the ones that fit the space and building up that forested scene. What I may also do is make a couple of really shorter ones, and I'm going to have them on the other side of the track, just around this grassy knoll here. And I want to give a suggestion that the railway is passing through a little copse of trees rather than being the boundary to those trees. And I think that that will go a long way to force the viewing angles of the model and sort of set up these individual scenes which add interest and just stop people from perhaps taking in the whole thing in one go, but focus them into key areas of the model. This is the part of the model making which I always feel most worried about. It has to be said, because we're at a stage now where if I stopped, you'd look at this and think, yeah, that's all right. But I want to add these trees, and the part of my mind is telling me, what if this goes wrong? What if it looks terrible? But that's where confidence is king in making railway models. In fact, any models. You've got to have faith in yourself that it's okay, don't worry, we can fix this. So we're going to dive in, we're going to knock some holes straight through the base, and we're going to add these trees. If it looks really grim, we can take those trees out and we can plug those holes with a bit of vegetation. So all is not lost, but this is always the bit that I get most nervous about. And what I'm going to do now is just add some of this glue to the hole. And that's so that when I push the tree in, there is some glue that will definitely make it down into the structure. And there we are. And what you might find is that some of these trees have a better side than others. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come around there, and we've got a bit of time just to manipulate the tree, and I'm going to try turning it around and just making sure that we get the best side to face out so that the tree looks comfortable, like it grew there and wasn't just placed there. We got those 6 trees in. They actually went in a lot easier than I was fearing, and that's often the case, that you fear the worst but get the best. Now, we've tried to group them together, but not make them look too uniform. Trees in the real world do not grow in straight lines unless they were planted that way. So we've tried to randomize it. I've also got this one here on the other side of the tracks, just to get that effect of the track going through the trees. And now that I've got these 6 in, I'm happy with their placement. It gives me a much better idea of how many more I need. So I'm going to make another 6, dot them around, and then we're on to the rocks, and I'm going to show you how we're going to transform those cast plaster rocks and make them look like real rocks, and then we're going to add them around the waterfall area. Now, I've retired up to Weir Yard in the loft, and this is so that I can paint these rocks that we cast. I know we talked about these in pretty much the first episode and then studiously ignored them. But there is a reason for this. Basically, there's a lot of other things that have had to be done first, and it's just meant that I've been putting these off. So what I've got here is a whole series of water-based paints. These 3 actually come in Woodland Scenic's kit, specifically for painting rocks, and these as you remember, we cast in the Woodland Scenics rubber mould, and they've actually turned out really, really nice. And if you were modelling somewhere like Dover or Ramsgate and you wanted a chalk cliff, I'm guessing actually just a quick wash over, like a dirty wash, to bring out the detail, and they'd be great for chalk. But we don't want that. We're looking for a more slatey feel. So I've got a whole bunch of these different paints. Now these have been sat festering for a very long time. So I think what I'm going to do is actually the Woodland Scenics ones look in the best condition. I'm looking through some of these others. I'm not actually sure where these came from. So I'm going to put these to one side and I'm going to concentrate on these. Because we want a slate feel, I think I'm going to go quite heavily on the darker colour. So I'm going to give these a quick shake. And they've actually not done too bad. And I've also got a little cup here of water because I want to thin these right down as I do these. So first up, let's have a think about this. I think let's go all in with the dark colour there. And that does actually look quite watery to start with. So I'm going to, actually no, it's not too bad. This is quite thick, but it does seem to be ready mixed. And I'm going to use plenty of water. And I'm just going to really just try and get the water in there, get it into all of the crevices. And I think the trick with this is not too much of the paint. So you can see it's just hugging into all of the little contours. Because it's water-based, just getting plenty of water from the pot there. And you can keep stretching that paint out. Stretch it out, stretch it out. A little tiny bit. I think I got a little bit too much initially. There we go. This is actually, you can see the detail coming through. And again, these kits, this is really easy. And it's one of the things that I'm really big on throughout this entire project. Is keeping it easy. I know a lot of people, they get frightened and think, well, I'm not good enough to do that. And of course you are good enough to do that. Don't let the people who like to be all exclusive and that on YouTube put you off, because they're talking rubbish and you do have the skills to do these. This kit in particular from Woodland Scenics is so easy, and it's what I like about Woodland Scenics is they bring all these great products through to the market, and it just makes things so much easier for the modeler to get great results without having to put a lot of innovative effort in, so to speak. And at the end of the day, why do you want to make your life really hard? Let's just get that in there. Just trying to get rid of all those bits of white at the edge. They're actually drying very quickly, it has to be said, but I'm going to get a base coat, the dark, on all of these. Let it soak in as well, because the plaster, it will soak in a little bit. And you could always mix these colours up on a palette beforehand. That's absolutely fine. Because you're kind of wanting to get different shades. You want highlights, you want lowlights. And this is where actually some of the Games Workshop paints, actually, we don't talk enough about Games Workshop. But they've got some great ranges of paints for, again, making it easy for the modeler to get the highlights and the lowlights. But see, we're going for a slate type colour. So I will look through some of those other paints and see if we've got a kind of green to go into this as well. I will add some brown as well, because I'm very mindful that we've got some outcrops on the layout that are effectively just the brown and the plaster. So I don't want the actual rock faces to look completely out of place with these rocky outcrops, because nature, when it comes to rock, it doesn't tend to mix things up too much. And this is effectively our first pass. This will sink into the top layer of the plaster. I'm quite happy how these are turning out for now. And I think they will lighten a little bit as they dry as well. And they'll lose that almost like a slightly gloss effect. When it's wet, the water does make it look slightly gloss. So we're back here, and the thing about this, we're going to go now for a different colour. I've got the brown ready, but if you're not happy with any of these colours, you can keep going. It's water-based, just keep going, washing it over, and everything will be absolutely fine. And that's what I love about stuff like this, is that it's very, very forgiving. So I'm going to go on. We've kind of sealed the surface a bit, so it's not quite so thirsty on the paint. Now the reason that I need to put some brown in here is because this is to get it to match up to the actual base coat that we've got showing through on the layout. And that's a kind of a brown colour. With a bit of hindsight, I should have painted the ground a kind of a slate colour where it showed through. But it's not really practical at the moment, and not really a huge problem. But we're going to just get all that in there. Going now with another pass with the darker colour. This time round I'm going to use it a little bit more neat, a little bit less water. Mute down the brown a little bit. The brown will still be there, but just trying to get a little bit more dark suggestion into here. And like I said before, you don't have to, on these subsequent coats, go whole hog. It's simply a case of you've already got a coating in there. You don't have that white anymore. And of course, if there's any that you think, actually that looks alright, you don't have to keep painting these. I'm just, I want to get more towards that slatey colour. There we go. I'm going to let them dry. If I need another coat of anything, I'll do that. I'll make that decision once they are dry. And we can do some final weathering if we need to once they're in situ on the layout. We've come back in now with the rocks. They're all painted, they're dried, and actually they look really good. And it just goes to show that this method of making rocks, plaster casting them using the Woodland Scenics moulds and plaster, really does work well. So we're now at a point where I've got to start fitting them into this scene. At the moment it looks a little bit sandy, chalky, because we've got the original base colour showing through, and that just shows the importance of adding that brown paint into the plaster mix. But we need slate because this is supposed to be North Wales. So that's where these ready rocks come in. And what we've done, we've chose the small outcrops, perfect for building up where I want this waterfall, which is going to go up here. And you can see the outline of the waterfall. It was built in when we were shaping that shaper sheet, and that's one of the things that we were doing then. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look through these rocks, and it's a case of picking a piece of rock and deciding where it fits best, and then we're going to be gluing it in. So I've started here with the biggest rock in the set, and I want to fit the bigger ones in and then start to use up the smaller and smaller ones and really just start to set this scene. I also want to make sure that what looks like the strata in the rocks loosely follows each other, because that's how real rocks work. So first up, we've got the big one, and I think that we're going to be able to fit that in somewhere like there. I'm going to do a test fit of all these as well. You don't want to just go in gung-ho. And we're going to use some of the Woodland Scenics ballast mixed with glue to just kind of fill in around the edges. And then I'm also going to use some of the static grass just to blend everything in. Trust me, it will work. We're just going to work our way in around all of these outcrops, and we're going to be filling in these little gaps in between. We'll build up with the Woodland Scenics ballast, the same ballast that I used elsewhere, and that's going to be fastened in with glue. And then when we put the water in, it's going to go in and follow those contours, and it should really look good. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to position all these. When I'm happy with that, I'm going to start gluing them in, and then we can build up the terrain around them. I'm going to be using the same PVA, the speed bond that we were using before. Nice and generous with that. That'll stick it all together, and of course we let it all completely dry before we add the water. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because that's the next video. The rocks went in pretty easily, and then I used a combination of PVA and the ballast around them just to bed them in. I sprayed that over with the same watered down PVA mix that we set the ballast with, and that just helped to smooth the ballast, and you can actually use it to wash it off the top faces of the rocks. So hopefully what we've now got is what looks like a credible face that's been eroded by water. So all of the topsoil and everything like that is gone, and what we're seeing is the base stratification of the slate. Now what I want to do next is just around the edges, I want to put in a little bit of vegetation to blend what will be the stream into the surrounding area. And I'm going to be doing this with, again, the Woodland Scenics clump foliage, and I'm just going to glue this in place with some more of the speed bond. And once that's done, it's just simply a case of leaving it all to dry. And we'll leave it a couple of days in front of a nice warm fire, and it'll just drive that moisture off. So when we come to cast the water in the next video, we don't end up with a milkiness creeping in from underneath with any of that trapped moisture. So what I'm going to do here is around the edges, I'm just going to put some blobs of glue, maybe even just out onto the rocks. And I'll put a few up here as well, because if they're just in a neat line, they'll look a bit silly. And then I've got a big bag of clump foliage. I really love this stuff. It's so easy to use. We're just going to push this in, and I'm going to put another bit there. And this just gives the sense of vegetation going right down to the edge. And we just keep building this up until we're happy with it. As with a lot of these things, you don't want to overdo it. Sometimes that can be quite devastating. It's like I showed you with the trees. A dozen well-made trees work so much better than just trying to flood the area with lots and lots of trees. You really don't need to do that. And it's the same with this. Just very carefully blending the edge around these rocks. And I put a couple in over here as well, because I didn't want it to look like the only rocks were in the stream, just to give a sense that there's a lot more going on with the geology of this mountain. A lot of model making is simply about blending, making things seem like they're part of a landscape and not just plonked on top of it. I hope you found this video really informative. I've actually really enjoyed showing you the development of Project 009, and as you can see, it very quickly comes together in what looks like a really great layout. And all of these techniques that I've been showing you are really easy. There's nothing complex about any of this, and all you need is confidence in your own abilities. And if you follow the steps as we've gone through these videos, you too can build something just like this on your home model. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling, and I'll see you next time when we're going to be looking into casting that water feature. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Andy Finch, Chris Moss, Robert Sears, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grant Line Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, and Mo Henry. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.